Hi, this is Sarah with Chapter 23, Personality Disorders. Here's our objectives for the chapter. Now, just as an introduction, you can't really talk about personality disorders without talking about personalities in general. And yes, I realize that there's a lot of gray area with the concept of personality and how they're developed, and everybody has their own, but we have to start somewhere. So here we go. Personality can be defined as the total of the emotional and behavioral characteristics that are particular to a specific person, and these remain somewhat stable and predictable over time. Now, yes, people change, but generally speaking, if someone is laid back early on in life, they'll be laid back throughout their adult life and in through their elderly years. Same with people who have impulse control problems or anger management problems. They might find ways to overcome their anger management problems, but it usually will always remain an issue for them to some degree. Now, personality traits and are characteristics with which an individual is born or develops early in life. They influence the way in which he or she perceives and relates to the environment and are usually quite stable over time. Now, personality disorders occur when these traits become really rigid and inflexible, and they contribute to maladaptive patterns of behavior or impairment in functioning. And that's the big thing, because everyone can be quirky. I mean, there's no law against being quirky. Or funny, or a little off. However, when those personality traits start to make the person behave in a way that is maladaptive or impairs their functioning, that's when it starts to be a problem. Personality development occurs in response to a number of biological and psychological influences. There's heredity, there's temperament that you're born with, there's experiential learning, so what happens to you along the life path, and then there's social interactions, so interactions that happen socially, especially those with significant others, like spouses or siblings or parents, those who are close to you. People with personality disorders are often not treated in acute care settings in which the personality disorder is their primary psychiatric disorder. So what this means is that, yes, personality disorders affect people's lives, and oftentimes they will either seek treatment or be court-ordered to seek treatment. However, usually if the personality disorder is the only thing they have wrong with or have going on with them, they won't be hospitalized for that personality disorder. Many clients with other psychiatric and medical diagnoses also manifest symptoms of personality disorders. So some people will come in with, like a major medical or a major psychiatric disorder, and they also have a personality disorder. And this happens quite often. Nurses are likely to encounter clients with these personality characteristics frequently in all health settings. Now, just some historical aspects. In the 1800s, the first recognition that personality disorders, apart from active psychosis, were a cause for their own special concern was in 1801, so the early 1800s, with the recognition that an individual can behave irrationally even when their powers of intellect are intact. So they don't have a psychotic break, they're not hallucinating, they're not doing anything like that. However, they're behaving very, very irrationally. And then as time went on, and we have the development of the DSM, currently the DSM-5 identifies 10 specific types of personality disorders, and we're going to talk about them now. The first one is a paranoid personality disorder. This is a pervasive, persistent, and inappropriate mistrust of others. Individuals with this disorder are very, very suspicious of others' motives and assume that others intend to exploit, harm, or deceive them. The disorder is more common in men than in women. Individuals with paranoid personality disorder are constantly on guard, hypervigilant, and ready for any real or imagined threat. They trust absolutely no one and are constantly testing the honesty of others. Now, these individuals are insensitive to the feelings of others, but for they themselves, they're extremely oversensitive and tend to misinterpret even the smallest cues within their environment, and they magnify these very, very small cues and distort them into thoughts that others are trying to trick them or deceive them. So So, for instance, if they make plans for dinner with somebody, a friend, and the friend is 5 minutes late, it's not just, hey, the friend got caught in traffic and it's 5 minutes late. It's, oh, the friend took that 5 minutes and now they're plotting to trick me and steal my money and that type of thing. I mean, a totally irrational thought process is tied to somebody just being 5 minutes late for dinner. Now, those with paranoid personality disorder do not accept responsibility for their own behavior typically, and they maintain their self-esteem by attributing their shortcomings to others. So it's not their fault, it's everybody else's fault. Some predisposing factors, they think there might be a genetic link, and then they also think that there might be, these folks might be subject to early parental antagonism and harassment. And, we don't like to think of parents harassing their children, but in some dysfunctional families, that's exactly what happens. And so they think there might be a link with the paranoid personality disorder in that. Some people, however, they have no risk factors or anything like that, and they still develop paranoid personality disorder. So with this disorder and with all of them, they don't know for sure what causes them. The next one is schizoid personality disorder. Now, this is not the same as schizophrenia or schizoform-like disorders. Schizoid personality disorder, even though it kind of shares that same root word, it's completely different. And this is characterized primarily by a profound defect in the ability to form personal relationships or to respond to others in any meaningful emotional way. Now, prevalence within the general population has been estimated at between 3 and 7.5%, and diagnosis occurs more frequently in men. Individuals with schizoid personality disorder are indifferent to others, aloof, very detached, and unable to experience pleasure. The effect of these individuals is commonly very bland and kind of a constricted affect and effect on others. They have no close friends and prefer to be alone. In the presence of others, they appear very shy, very anxious, or uneasy. And again, predisposing factors, there might be that possible hereditary factor. And typically these people report a childhood that they characterize as very bleak and cold, unempathetic, and most noticeably it's lacking in a nurturing force in that childhood. Schizotypal personality disorder. This is a graver form of the pathologically less severe schizoid personality pattern, and studies indicate that approximately 1 to 2% of the population has this disorder. Individuals with schizotypal personality disorder are very aloof, isolated, behave in that bland and apathetic manner. Now, symptoms of this type of personality disorder include magical thinking, ideas of reference, illusions, depersonalizations, very, very profound superstitiousness, some bizarre speech sometimes, delusions, hallucinations, and then withdrawal into self. So you can see how that is different from the previously discussed schizoid personality disorder. Also with schizotypal personality disorder, when under stress, the person may decompensate and demonstrate other psychotic symptoms. They think that predisposing factors, heredity, again, may be a factor. Possible physiological influence, such as neurochemical dysfunctions within certain areas of the brain, or some anatomic deficits or dysfunctions in certain areas of the brain. And then early family dynamics of those who are diagnosed with schizotypal personality disorder is described as being one of indifference, impassivity, very, very formal family dynamic. And so it leads to the person being very uncomfortable with personal affection and closeness. Antisocial personality disorder is the next one we're going to talk about, and this is a pattern of really socially irresponsible, exploitive, and guiltless behavior. And it's evident in the tendency to fail to conform to the law, to sustain, they're unable to sustain consistent employment, or they exploit and or manipulate others for their own personal gain. They deceive others quite frequently, and they fail to develop stable relationships. The prevalence estimates in the U.S., people with antisocial personality disorder is from 2 to 4% in men and about 1% in women. And we're going to look at the clinical picture and predisposing factors later on in the lecture, and we really go into it. Borderline personality disorder. This is characterized by a pattern of intense and chaotic relationships. Excuse me. Affective instability. So they are really, really happy and buoyantly happy, and then they're not. They can be very, very angry, very, very unstable affect, and it fluctuates very, very quickly. Let's see, fluctuating and extreme attitudes regarding other people. People are either your best friend, or they're your sworn enemy, and there's nothing in between. So very extreme attitudes. Impulsive behavior. It can be directly or indirectly self-destructive behavior. So directly self-destructive behavior would be, racing your car at 150 miles an hour. Indirect self-destructive behavior would be spending your whole paycheck on on clothes instead of spending it on your rent, so that you get kicked out a month or two down the line. And they also these people tend to lack a clear sense of identity. About 1 to 2% of the population are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And it's more common in men than in women. Now, this is another one that is that you'll see a lot of, and so we're really going to go into what the clinical picture and predisposing factors are in another couple of slides. The next one is histrionic personality disorder. This is characterized by colorful, dramatic, and extroverted behavior. And these people are very, very excitable, very, very emotional. These people can be a lot of fun to be around. They can also be incredibly exhausting to be around. Individuals with histrionic personality disorder are very, very self-dramatizing, attention-seeking, very, very gregarious, but they can also be very manipulative and exhibitionistic. These individuals have this consuming need for approval, and they feel very dejected and anxious if they don't get it. They're highly distractible, have difficulty paying attention to detail. They're easily influenced by others, have a lot of difficulty forming close relationships, tend to be very strongly dependent or codependent on those that they interact with, and they may also complain of some physical symptoms. Predisposing factors. Let's see, hereditary might be a factor, learned behavior patterns might be a factor, but they really don't know what causes this type of personality disorder. The narcissistic personality disorder. So if this helps you, the word narcissist is derived from a Greek myth. And there was this, in the Greek myth, there was this young man named Narcissus who rejected the love of a nymph named Echo, and so he was cursed that he would only fall in love with his own reflection, and so he spent the rest of his life simply gazing into his reflection in a pond or something like that. And so that's where they get the name for this personality disorder, because this is characterized by people who really, really, really love themselves. And they have a really inflated and exaggerated sense of their own self-worth. Now, this disorder is more common in men than in women. Individuals with narcissistic personality disorder are overly self-centered, and they exploit others in an effort to fulfill their own desires. Their mood, which is often very, very grandiose, is usually very optimistic, relaxed, cheerful, and carefree. Which, what's wrong with that? That sounds great. However, if this mood can easily change and go the other way into, rampant rage and rage against others, and be very, very unpleasant to be around, if they don't meet their expectations, or if they don't receive the positive feedback that they expect or that they feel they deserve. Criticism from others can also cause them to respond with rage and shame and humiliation. And so people who are narcissists, when things are good with someone who's a narcissist, it's fun, it's good, it's great. However, you never have an interaction with anybody where there isn't some give and take, and there's always going you're always going to get some negative feedback from somebody. And people with narcissistic personality disorder cannot take that even slightly negative slightly negative feedback. And so they just fly into a rage. And so it can be really difficult to be around somebody who has this narcissistic personality disorder. Avoidant personality disorder. This is characterized by extreme sensitivity to rejection and social withdrawal. Now, none of us like to be rejected. I mean, it's not comfortable for anybody. But with avoidant personality disorder, they are extremely sensitive to this rejection. And such to the point that they can completely withdraw from all social interaction. Individuals with this personality disorder can be very, very awkward and uncomfortable in any social situation. And again, it's not that they don't like other people. It's just that they really, really, really don't, or are very sensitive to being rejected from other people. They have a desire to have close relationships, but they can't help but believe that having any such relationship is going to result in some sort of pain or disillusionment. And that's the thing about just relationships in general, is that, you know, no relationship, whether it be between a spouse or friends or anything, it's not always going to be happy. There's going to be some times when you don't get along or you disagree. And for people with avoidant personality disorder, the pain of that is such that they just withdraw from all social interaction. Now, these folks are often lonely. They express feelings of being unwanted, and they view others as being critical, betraying, and humiliating. But they don't tie the fact that they don't engage with others to being, you know, a major cause of why they are so lonely. So sometimes there's very, very little self-recognition of their role in things, which is part of the disorder. Dependent personality disorder. This is a pattern of relying excessively on others for emotional support. This disorder is relatively common within the population, and it's more common among more common among women than men. And it's more common in the youngest children of a family than the older ones. Individuals with dependent personality disorder have a notable lack of self-confidence that is often apparent in their posture, their voice, their mannerisms. They're typically very passive, and they acquiesce to the desires of others, regardless of what they want in a situation. These individuals tend to avoid positions of responsibility, and if they are forced into a position of responsibility, they become very, very anxious. They typically have a very low self-worth, and they're easily hurt by criticism and disapproval. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, this isn't the same as regular OCD. This is an obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So it has some of the characteristics, but it also stands alone on its own as a disorder diagnosis. This is characterized by an inflexibility about the way things must be done, and these folks tend to be devoted to productivity at the exclusion of personal pleasure. So people who are very profound workaholics probably have some degree of obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, for a lot of people, that works for them because they go to work. They are devoted to being productive at work, and so their boss is happy, their company is happy. Depending on their spouse may be happy because there's a lot of money coming in. However, if you really look at it, they probably have some degree of this obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, the disorder is relatively common, and it occurs more often in men than in women. And within the family constellation, it appears to be more common amongst the oldest children. Now, individuals with obsessive compulsive personality disorder are especially concerned with matters of organization and efficiency, and they tend to be very, very rigid and unbending about rules and procedures. Social behavior tends to be very polite and formal, and these individuals are very rank conscious. They can be very ingratiating with authority figures, but they can be really autocratic and pretty awful to their subordinates. Now, on the surface, these individuals appear to be very calm and controlled, but underneath this very calm exterior can lie a great deal of ambivalence and conflict and outright hostility. This type of person is over preoccupied with details and rules and lists, orders and organization. and schedules to the extent that the major point of the activity is lost. And that is where obsessive compulsive personality disorder becomes a problem, because a lot of these characteristics, that's what you have to do to get through the day in an orderly manner. However, if you're so preoccupied with the details and the rules and the lists that you're unable to actually accomplish anything, then this is when it becomes a problem. They can also show a degree of perfectionism that actually starts to interfere with task completion. And they're unable to complete a project because because he or she is overly concerned or has overly strict standards that aren't met. And with almost any project, you're going to give up something. You might be very, very close to having it absolutely perfect, but there might be something in your mind that would make it that much more perfect, and they can't stop the project until that's accomplished. And no matter what the project is, there's always something you can do to improve it. And so for people with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, they're unable to just say, okay, you know what, this is great, this is just fine, I have to stop now because there's always going to be something to improve. They can't just stop that. And so then they don't get the project done because they're never done improving it. Okay. Some predisposing factors: over control of parents, with a notable lack of positive reinforcement for acceptable behavior, and also frequent punishment for undesirable behavior. That's the one common characteristic that obsessive compulsive personality disorder folks tend to have. Now, okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, as far as the application of the nursing process, now we're really going to go into that borderline personality disorder and and the other one. I can't remember what the other one is, but we're going to go into those two that you'll see very, very, very much. So the borderline personality disorder, it's designated as borderline because of the tendency of these clients to fall on the border between neuroses and psychoses. So these folks have a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image, affects, and marked impulsivity beginning in early adulthood, and it's present in a variety of contexts. They're most strikingly identified by the intensity and instability of their affect and behavior, and these behaviors are affecting their ability to exist within, in life and get things done in the course of the day. Common behaviors include chronic, profound depression, an inability to be alone, clinging and distancing behaviors, splitting, manipulation, self-destructive behaviors, and impulsivity. Okay, some of the nursing diagnoses for the borderline personality disorder, you guys can read through these. The most pressing one would be risk for suicide, risk for other directed violence, for obvious reasons. And so, as always, you want to be assessing for people's risk for suicide and performing violence on somebody else. Now, the outcomes that we want with borderline personality disorder, the number one is that they haven't harmed themselves, that they seek out the staff when the desire for self-mutilation is strong, that they're able to identify whatever the source of the anger is, and they're able to express that anger appropriately. Others are that they're able to relate to more than one staff member, and they're able to complete the activities of daily living independently, and lastly, that they do not manipulate one staff member against the other in order to fulfill their own desires. Now, with planning and implementation, nursing intervention for the client with a borderline personality disorder is aimed at protecting the client from harm. The nurse is also going to assist the client to advance in the development of personality by confronting whatever the source of their internalized anger is. Now, evaluation for the care of the client with borderline personality disorder is based on the accomplishment of whatever those previously determined outcome criteria are. So now, antisocial personality disorder. This is Most frequently encountered in prisons, jails, and rehab services. So if you work in that setting, you're going to see antisocial personality disorder a lot. And when you go over to Nexus, you'll also see it a lot over in Nexus. When clients are seen, it's commonly a way to avoid their legal consequences. And sometimes they're admitted into the healthcare system by a court order for a psychological evaluation. Now, sometimes this is called sociopathic or psychopathic or psychopathic behavior. Usually it's only seen in clinical settings when they're admitted by a court order for a psychological evaluation. Common behaviors include exploitation and manipulation of others for personal gain, being very belligerent and argumentative, lacking remorse for any of their actions. They're unable to delay gratification. They have a low tolerance for frustration, an inconsistent work or academic performance, failure to conform to societal norms. They tend to be very impulsive and reckless. They have an inability to function as a responsible parent, and they have an inability to form a lasting monogamous relationship. Predisposing factors, there might be a possible genetic influence. They might have a history of having a disruptive behavior disorder as a child, absent, erratic, or very inconsistent parental discipline in their past, be from extreme poverty, have a history of being removed from the home, growing up without parental figures of either sex, so they don't have a mother figure or a father figure, so they don't have any parental figures. And having a history of always being rescued when in trouble. So if they get into trouble in junior high and high school, somebody always steps in and says, "Oh, you're just a kid, we'll make this go away," and they don't have to accept the consequences of whatever their behavior was. Here are some of the nursing diagnoses. Again, the most pressing one would be risk for other directed violence related to their rage reactions, negative role modeling, or an inability to tolerate frustration. And here are some more. You can read those. Outcomes. Outcomes for antisocial personality disorder. The client will be able to discuss angry feelings with staff and in group sessions. They haven't harmed themselves or others. That's a big one. They're able to rechannel their hostility into socially acceptable behaviors, and they're able to follow rules and regulations of the therapy environment. The client is also we also want them to be able to verbalize which of their behaviors are not acceptable, and to also show regard for the rights of others by delaying gratification of their own desires when appropriate. And again, when you go over to Nexus next fall, you'll see people who are actively working on these types of outcomes with regard to their behavior prior to coming into Nexus. Manipulation is a huge one, and the guys at Nexus can be very manipulative, and so they work a lot on identifying when they're manipulating others and to not do that. Planning. Nursing care is aimed at ensuring the safety of the client and others, helping the client recognize their unacceptable behavior, and also to decrease the unacceptable behavior. Because some people will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm totally manipulating that person," but they keep on doing it, and so that's not what we want. So we also want to assist the client to gain insight into their own behaviors, and also help the client learn how to delay gratification. Evaluation is if they accomplish those goals. Now, some of the treatment modalities, there's interpersonal psychotherapy, so that would be one-on-one, psychoanalytical psychotherapy, that's also one-on-one. There can be milieu or group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, that's the type that they use over at Nexus, and you'll get to see that. When it works, it's really, really fantastic. Dialectical behavior therapy, and then psychopharmacology.